These are the panels we're going to be wiring. These up here are pilot lights. Right below that you have push buttons. They're recessed. The red ones generally for a stop. The green ones are generally for start, but they can also be used for forward and reverse. Jog, which is yellow. Emergency e-stop. You have selector switches here. This one here is a momentary. It goes back to its initial position. That's a 2 position. This is a 3 position maintained, so you can do things like off, reverse, forward, or speed 1, speed 2. Inside the panel, you'll find the backs of the pilot lights. So these guys here, if you have a look at what it says, the code is C7N5R, R for red, so it's a red LED light. So you have different colors. You snap them on. These pieces here come off, right? So you have the little holder, which is this guy right here. And then you've got the light itself. And you've got 2 screws. So like we learned in class for ladder logic, it's X1, X2 for a light. Okay. So it's the same thing for the push button. So a normally closed push button here would have a normally closed, as you see here, 1 and 2. So this also, they're all interchangeable. These pieces here can snap off. You can add more on the sides, stack more on top as well. As you see here, these ones here have 2 and 3 respectively. You have these tie wraps here, tie wrap holders. So the goal is to actually pass all the wires nice and neatly from the tops and bottoms of the push buttons and lights and pass them through these tie wrap holders all the way through and into the terminals here. This terminal here is going to be used to go from the door, which is the push buttons basically and the lights, going into the bottoms here, and the tops will go to relays and contactors at the top. So up here as an example, we're going to be putting bases. So a base for an 8-pin relay. We'd wire it up, then we'd put a relay in it. On the right hand side here, this section here, this is where we put the contactors. So on the DIN rail, we will just snap it in. Right now I'm just putting it in temporarily. And below that, so we have a bit more space here, and the reason for that is to make room for the OL. Okay. Then we also have timers, so we have a base for a timer as well. So this is an 11-pin. The one to the left is an 8-pin. So this is for the on-run timer that we discussed. So the on-run timer here, this guy here is upside down, but basically the on-run timer goes directly into this base here. We have terminals. So this is the overview of the inside of the panel. We talked about these terminals here, right? And these terminals here, A1, A2, F1, F4. So this is for the DC motor that's located on the left here. A1, A2 is the armature, F1, S4 is the field. On the right here, we have terminals going into a seal tight that goes into a remote station. So we'll be able to do some labs where we can control a motor from 2 different locations, from the actual door, which would be local, and remote. Since I'm here, I'll show you the disconnect switch. You'll need a hasp and a lock for this. Right, so you can turn on power, turn off power, lock out. Also inside at the very top, this is where the power comes in. So in order to have power anywhere in this panel, we'd have to take the lock off, turn the power on, turn this breaker on. Once you have this breaker on, you have power on line and neutral. This breaker here is sending that line to the DC power supply. Why a DC power supply? Because we have a DC motor. Okay. So once we turn this breaker on, the 2 terminals here are labeled plus and minus. You can see the red and black wires here. That's your DC that's going to go to your motor. And all wires will be passed through these trays. So once they're passed in there, all the way through, you put the covers back on so you can't see where all the wires are going. And you can keep it all nice and clean once everything is finished. So all wires are going to have to be shaped An example of that would be here. So this is a start push button, so I have 3 and 4. So let's say from 4, I'm going to go inside the actual panel. Well, look at the shape. I basically go in, I screw it in, I go straight down, leave enough room for a sticker there, bend the wire back. Once it's at the back, I want to bend it to go toward the tie wrap, whichever end you're using. So it's all nice and straight once everything is done and tie wraps are tightened. It's all 90 degrees, nice and straight. Okay, so a couple of wires are a bit loose here, but basically this here is the goal. If you have a look, when you see it, once it's screwed in, it's all nice and straight. So if you look at the terminals, this one's not complete yet, but you're basically going inside the terminal block. So the wire, or one of the wires that I showed you before, is going to go underneath here. And then from there, it'll leave to go to a relay or a contactor.